I'm Jenny Gage, and this is Life Take Two.
Hey everybody, welcome to Life Take Two. I'm Jenny, and I'm sorry that I've been missing in action. I've spent most of the past 3 days mostly in bed, except for our election night live stream, and I've just been waiting for my voice to come back enough to do this video. So I'm bundled up, I'm hydrated, I'm full of chicken soup, and I'm ready to go. Today I want to connect some dots for you. We're going to talk about what J.D. Vance's slam on his wife Usha has to do with the Christian nationalist white supremacist movement in America today. First, here's that video from J.D. on tour with Turning Point USA just last week.
My wife did not grow up Christian. I think it's fair to say that she grew up in a Hindu family, but not a particularly religious family in either direction. Now, most Sundays, Usha will come with me to church. As I've told her, and I've said publicly, and I'll say now in front of 10,000 of my closest friends, do I hope eventually that she is somehow moved by the same thing that I was moved in by church? Yeah, I honestly do wish that, because I believe in the Christian gospel, and I hope eventually my wife comes to see it the same way. But if she doesn't, then God says everybody has free will, and so that doesn't cause a problem for me. That's something you work out with your friends, with your family, with the person that you love.
Now, of course, a lot of people are talking about this video in relation to the JD and Erica love hug, where she ran her fingers through his hair. And so we're talking about the relationship, we're talking about Usha and JD's marriage, and we're focusing more on that than we are the larger conversation of how this speech fits into the ideology of Christian nationalism. And as a former Christian nationalist, white supremacist, Mormon trad wife, huge Trump supporter, all-out MAGA girly, I think that part of the conversation is far more important to all of us than analyzing whether or not Usha should stay with JD or whether JD is about to jump ship and go for Erica, which I do think he is. But that's not really going to impact me. We talk a lot about forms of discrimination like racism, ageism, sexism, and things like that. But a term that I don't hear people talking about enough is faithism, or religious superiority, religious supremacy. A couple of years ago, somebody gave a speech at the United Nations, and I don't remember who it is, and I haven't been able to pull it, even with AI searching for me and things like that. I'm a little bit nerdy, so I was listening to the United Nations, and it caught my attention as a former religious freak, because this person said that faithism was a bigger threat to the safety, security, and peace of the globe than all of the other forms of discrimination combined. So what exactly is faithism? Now, of course, the world is full of different religions. There are almost 400,000 different churches registered just in the United States alone. So people are going to disagree on religion, right? People having different beliefs and going to different churches isn't a problem. Like any other form of discrimination, it's when those people are in power and they use their religious belief to oppress, abuse, and suppress people of other religions. And that's what happens in faithism. We are perfectly capable of having functional social interactions with people of other faiths as long as we do not discriminate against that person of other faith. Here's how that would look in the real world if you had people of different faiths who are not discriminating against one another. Maybe you have a Catholic over here and a Buddhist over here, and they're next door neighbors, and the Buddhist thinks, well, I would never be a Catholic because I don't believe in that. And the Catholic thinks, well, I will never be a Buddhist because I don't believe in that. But they hold space for the fact that, well, I don't know, maybe Catholicism is true, and I don't know, maybe Buddhism is true. And it doesn't matter. I'm going to treat my neighbor the way that I would treat anybody else, whether they're Catholic or Buddhist or not. Here's what religious superiority looks like. I was a Mormon. I believed that my church, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, was the only true church upon the face of the earth. I believed that eventually every knee would bow and every tongue confess that Jesus was the Christ, and that all peoples on the face of the earth would have the choice to either accept the Mormon gospel or be damned for the rest of eternity. I didn't hold space for the fact that my Catholic neighbor might be right, that this was just faith, that this was just belief, that who knows, maybe I'm wrong. I didn't hold space for the fact that my Buddhist neighbor could be right or my atheist neighbor. You get the picture. I knew beyond the shadow of a doubt, because of childhood indoctrination, that my church was the ultimate truth, that it was absolute reality. That's religious superiority, religious supremacy. And here's where that became a problem. Every school year, I would send letters to the school requesting that my kids be put in the classes of the Mormon teachers. I thought that the non-Mormon teachers were inferior. In some cases, I thought that they were just downright evil. There was a lesbian fourth or fifth grade teacher in one of our schools, so she was clearly possessed of Satan. So I definitely didn't want my kids to actually end up in her classroom, even though she never talked about being a lesbian, but we parents knew. So I was born to a dad who had converted to the Mormon church. I think he joined the church when he was like in his late 20s, early 30s. He married my mom when he was like 32 years old. She was a lifelong member of the church. They get married in the temple. My dad would tell me just about 7 years ago, as I was leaving the Mormon church, that he lost his faith in the church at the temple. It was culty. It was crazy. He had to take an oath on his life and say in front of witnesses, wearing this weird culty outfit, that he was going to chop out his intestines and feed them to birds and beasts, right? That's part of the Mormon temple. So he told me that he went through the temple and realized, oh, this is a cult. I shouldn't have anything to do with this. But that was their wedding. So they get married. My mom's a lifelong multi-generational Mormon. My dad is a brand new convert who goes to the temple and decides this isn't true. So I grew up with a dad who I thought was just a brand new convert that was questioning. He would tell me later that he actually didn't believe in the church at all and was forced to go to Mormon church by my mom. That she told him, if you leave the church, I'll divorce you. If you tell the kids that you're not Mormon, I'll make sure you never see the kids again. This is what my dad told me 7 years ago. So some of this, obviously, I didn't know about as a kid growing up. But every once in a while, we would come home from church and there would be some weird lesson. So my dad went to church my whole entire life. He showed up in church every single Sunday, not believing ever. And we'd come home from church, and at the dinner table, all of us kids, he'd be like, so you guys, that lesson about the Book of Mormon today, that was just batshit crazy. And don't listen to anything that bishop was saying. And here's what would happen. My mom, who was the faithful believing member, would throw her dinner plate and cry and go stomping down the hallway, slam her bedroom door. And on her way down the hallway, she would be screaming, I don't have an eternal companion. I'm going to be all alone in heaven, because Roger's going to Mormon hell, which is technically called the Celestial Kingdom, but it's hell. And the crazy thing is that as a kid, I saw my dad showing up for his family. He worked a swing shift. So many hours that man worked to provide for us, make sure that we had a roof over our heads. He was the one who Saturday morning would wake up and clean the kitchen and mop the floors and vacuum before going out and doing all the yard work. He would read us stories. We had our childcraft books and Brothers Grimm fairy tales. He'd read us stories and sing us songs and tuck all the kids in bed at night while my mom, finished cleaning up after cooking dinner. My dad was always by my mom's side, and he loved her. And she did not love him back simply because he didn't believe in the Mormon church. By the way, this is the same mom who wrote me a letter several years back and told me that I am dead to her. I have not seen my mom since I left the Mormon church. It's been 7 years. So this is that same woman. One summer, I took the kids and I was walking in my mom and dad's front door, and they were standing in their front entryway, and my mom was screaming and crying because she had caught my dad sneaking down to a Lutheran church. He was Lutheran. They'd been married by that point for 40 years. And she was standing there by the staircase in their front entryway, bawling her eyes out. Again, that same phrase, I don't have an eternal companion. How could you do this to me? If he had been sacrificing tabby cats with some witches under the pine trees in the backyard, she couldn't have been more upset than she was about the fact that my dad I think he said that he was going to go buy a newspaper at Safeway, and instead he drove to a Lutheran church service. My dad was not allowed to practice his religion because my mom believed that her religion was the absolute truth. And so she discriminated against him and made his life miserable, and I'm sure is still making his life miserable to this day. Because my dad was a convert, of course, his family was not Mormon. So my grandma on that side, whose last name I took when I divorced, my grandma Katie McGage was a Lutheran. She went to Lutheran church her whole entire life. And the things that my mom said about my grandma's Lutheran beliefs when we were at home behind closed doors. My grandma had a really hard life. She was a single mom for many years, and then she got married, and then her husband passed away when she was still relatively young. She worked hard to just create a good life for herself and her kids. She didn't have money. She didn't have anything, but she would invite our family over for Sunday dinners sometimes, and we would sit there and eat, and then the whole entire 30-minute ride home, my mom would talk about what a piece of shit my grandma was because she had her coffee pot on. And like, oh my God, my kids walked in the house and smelled the coffee pot. She had this big German beer stein that was on her china hutch, and my mom took issue with the beer stein. My grandma also had a couple of boyfriends in my lifetime. She was a little hot and spicy. She had a redheaded boyfriend named Terry who rode a Harley, and I would spend the whole entire car ride home, again, with my mom talking about how evil and satanic and despicable my grandmother was. I was never allowed to love my grandma. Not because she wasn't a beautiful woman, but because she wasn't Mormon. And so my mom made sure that she didn't have time with us kids. My ex-husband's grandma married a non-member, and she was young. She was 14 at the time. That's a long, very Mormon-y story. He was in the army. They moved out to Arkansas. And of course, when I met them, they were much older. Grandpa was in his 90s. And the first thing that everyone told me about him was he hasn't joined the church yet. He's a non-member. Yes, they loved him, but we looked at him different. He wasn't as good as us. We discriminated against him. His name was Wiley Daniel. He was an amazing fucking man. He spent his entire life, after getting out of the army in the early 1900s, working in a steel mill outside of Smackover, Arkansas, in a little town called Camden. He would wake up every morning and take this, I don't know if it was a meat grinder or a wheat grinder. He had it clamped onto a table in his backyard under the oaks, and he would crack the acorns because he said that it was too hard for the squirrels to eat them. If I asked this man for his left leg, he would have given it to me. And I thought that he was under the influence of Satan because that's the only explanation that I had for the fact that his heart was so hard that he wouldn't accept the truth of Jesus Christ. And I'll never forget, after he finally passed away, my ex-husband immediately took Grandpa's name through the Mormon temple to baptize him, because you can do that when somebody's passed away. That's what they're doing in the Mormon temple. They're doing baptism for the dead. They've probably vicariously baptized your grandmas and grandpas, because every knee shall bow and every tongue confess that Jesus is the Christ. I never got over that feeling of disappointment in that man for not accepting God's truth until 7 years ago when I left the Mormon church. Then that religious superiority, that looking down on other people, magically evaporated. This is so sad to me to even talk about. Like, even just dredging up the memory of like riding in the backseat of the car with grandma for the first time, and she's a sweet little elderly woman, and just the look of like embarrassment that she has on her face telling me that her husband Wiley would never join the church, that he's a non-member, that he's not able to go to the temple for our wedding and stuff. Like, he was such a good husband and she loved him, but not like she would have if he had been a member of the church. Funny story from my own life on the topic of JD hoping that Usha converts. When I was like college age, I of course was dating a ton and hoping to find my eternal companion. And some of the guys that I dated at college were obviously LDS. Like, I mostly only dated other Mormons, but I also couldn't help myself from having feelings for a couple of guys that I worked with, and just, guys from my neighborhood and stuff. And I had a couple of guys that I dated that were not Mormon that were so incredible. Like, they were the best men in the world. And I broke up with every one of them. Like, we'd get to like 4 or 5 dates, and then it's like, I can't date you because you're not good enough for me. You're not worthy of me. You're not a priesthood holder. You haven't been baptized. I was always trying to convert those guys too. Like, it was probably like the second date that I'd give them a Book of Mormon, ask if they wanted to talk to the missionaries. And if the answer was no, then it was like, well, then you don't get to date Princess Jenny. So eventually I would have a marriage that was arranged by my bishop and a man from my stake. And I would end up with my Mormon returned missionary, Jake, who went to church every Sunday and took me through the temple to get married. And for 24 years, I suffered life-threatening, brutal, soul-crushing domestic violence that I just escaped 7 years ago last month. After my divorce, every old boyfriend in the world came crawling out of the woodworks as word spread amongst moms and sisters and old high school friends and things like that. And I think on Facebook too, I just mentioned that I was single. And so all the old boyfriends thought they'd have a whack at Jenny once again. And the guys that hadn't been Mormon that I wouldn't date because they wouldn't accept the church, they have all gone on to live such incredible lives. Like, one of them has been the mayor for several years of the city right next to mine up in the Portland area. He's just such a beautiful man. He runs this business where he makes these like custom wooden tables out of these huge trees. It's so beautiful. He has a gorgeous home. He is an incredible human being. I would have dated him, but I didn't want to leave Phoenix and move back to Portland. Almost all of those non-Mormon boyfriends have gone on to be like authors, politicians. One of them was running a huge nonprofit where he helped like homeless youth or something like that. And one of them has had an incredible musical career. He's sung like Broadway type of stuff and was really big in this Shakespearean festival that draws people from all over the world. And every single one of them was just spectacular human beings. We had conversations that just absolutely blew me away. Meanwhile, a couple of the Mormon guys that I've dated are like on their second divorce after cheating on both of their wives. A couple of the Mormon boys that I dated actually ended up in jail for robbing an Albertsons. Jake, of course, was a monster. So looking back on my whole life, I can see how that religious superiority, Faithism, this discrimination that I practiced, robbed me of connections with other people in really, really horrifying ways. And it blinded me to who people really are, right? MLK's famous I have a dream speech, that I have a dream that my children will be judged not by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. Racism is horrible. It separates us from connecting in community and individual relationships with people just based on their skin color. And Faithism does the same. I didn't like to invite the non-Mormon mommies to our family barbecues or our birthday parties or whatever. And if I ever did, it's because I was hoping that they would join the church. It wasn't because I actually wanted to get to know them. And isn't it funny the way that life sometimes goes in a direction that we don't expect it to? Because of course I left the Mormon church. And then just over 2 years ago, I also broke up with Jesus. I lost my faith in the Bible and Christianity, and I'm so much happier without it that even if God himself came down and said, I am the great I am, I just know things. Like I don't want any of that in my life. I'm so happy. But I was in a relationship. I'm, partnered with the love of my life. Kevin is amazing. And Kevin is very, very religious. Kevin's a devout Christian. And early on, when I first came out to him and told him that I no longer believed the Bible, that I definitely knew that I was an atheist and that I could no longer go to church and listen to worship music at home and all of that stuff, when I came out to him, I remember him telling me that he was going to pray for me, that I would find Jesus again. And how hurtful that was to me. And it's funny because how many years did I do that to other people? But when I experienced it for the first time, it was so painful. I remember just thinking, we have such an incredible relationship and I have shown up for Kevin in so many amazing ways. And if I just don't think in my head that Jesus is real and I don't want to go to church on Sundays and sit there with the worship team for 2 hours on a beautiful sunny day when I can be out feeding homeless people, which is what I do on Sundays, that's going to make you not love me, just the religion that I don't believe in. So we've had to work through that, and it's taken a lot of therapy, it's taken a lot of conversation, and it's taken a lot of love. And part of that conversation had to be that it is absolutely unacceptable for me to be in a relationship with somebody who discriminates against me because they think that their religion is better than mine, that I'm less of a person because I don't believe what you need me to believe. And I would say genuinely today that Kevin just loves me. He has a much more nuanced approach to religion, because how could you not if you spend 6.5 years with this? And if he could wave a little magic wand over me and make me Christian, I actually wish that he wasn't at work right now, because I'd love to ask him this question. You guys can ask this when we do a live stream together next week. I don't think that he would turn me into a Christian. I don't think he would make me believe in Jesus. I think that Kevin genuinely loves me for who I am. And part of that is because he's able to hold that space. He believes in the Bible, literally, like Adam and Eve, the flood, all of that. He believes in Jesus, literally, as resurrected Son of God. But he holds that space for the fact that he could be wrong and I could be right. And that doesn't matter. That's how we fight faithism. And of course, on a broader scale, this religious superiority is behind everything right now. It's why the widow Erica Kirk is going into colleges with Turning Point USA to try to preach the Christian gospel to everybody, because she believes that nobody is as good of a person not Christian as they would be Christian. She believes that her religion is absolute truth. These Project 2025 people, Mike Johnson, all these guys down there that are trying to shove religion down our throats, they're discriminating against us. They're practicing religious superiority. They're practicing Christian supremacy. If you want to see a lot of Christian supremacy right now, just go to any Facebook or Instagram post about Mom Donnie winning New York last night. You'll see so many people barfing up religious discrimination because he's Muslim. And the scary thing is, there is nothing that you can do to change this. Just like with racism, Black people in the 1930s couldn't just go to the white people and be like, hey, I'm pretty cool, we should be friends. No, it completely shapes your entire worldview. Just like as a woman with some of my sexist boyfriends, I couldn't say, hey, my driving is just as good as yours. No, they were assholes, and they genuinely thought that I was a terrible driver, despite the fact that they had a bunch of tickets and I had none. There is nothing that any of us can say to these religious zealots to make them think that we're good people. Their God, their Bible, their pastors on Sundays, and every single person in their community is telling them that you're a black sheep, that you're a son of perdition, that you're a weed that needs to be pulled up by the roots and burned. I guess what I do to fight it is I just be nicer than them. I pull out all my little Mormon girl skills and I bake them cinnamon rolls and I love bomb them, and I try to just be better. I'm spreading toxic empathy everywhere. It's the only weapon I got. Anyway, I'm going to go gargle some more salt water and take a 2-hour nap and then post this video. I'd love to hear what you guys think in the comments. Have a great day. Bye.